Hello, everybody. Welcome to our session here at R4. My name is Derek Blackard. I'm a senior franchise development consultant at RE/MAX headquarters. And today I have the pleasure of talking to you about the concept, the discipline of business planning. Are we on the right path to success? And so you really can't get more of a clear-cut topic than business planning, right? We've all heard of business planning. We know that it's important. We know that it's something that we need to be doing. But how often are we actually creating business plans? Not only creating them, but then using them and leveraging those business plans in order to make informed, better decisions about our business, in order to understand truly what it is we want to try and accomplish within our goal for the year. And so to kind of back up and solidify the importance of business planning, you've got one of my favorite quotes up there from Mr. Benjamin Franklin saying, "By failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail." So at the end of the day, business planning is what we're trying to do to guard against that, right? We want to put a plan in place that's going to set us up for success. So specifically, what is it that we're going to dive into today regarding the topic of business planning, right? And so up on the screen there in the PowerPoint, you see a definition of success, basically, right? And in order to be successful, there's basically two things you have to have. You got to be intentional and you got to be proactive, right? And so in our case, for business planning, we are solely focusing on the intentional aspect, right, of the success equation. And so within that, what we're going to dive into today in our session is different ingredients that we need to solve for, that we need to create in order to set ourselves up to be successful and basically create a business plan. And those different ingredients are, got to have a goal. Right? We have to have something that we're shooting for. We have to have something that's our motivation, something that we're passionate about wanting to achieve. And we need to put that above all else in our business and be the kind of the shining star that we look at as far as what is it that we want to accomplish in our business. And what we're going to do with that goal is boil that down into a revenue target. Right? We're going to try and quantify everything I just said about what we're passionate about, what we want to achieve and accomplish. We're going to try and boil that down into a revenue number. Right? From there, what we're going to do is we're going to take that goal and we're going to create some micro goals or benchmarks, if you will. And those benchmarks are going to be designed in order to help us digest and in more bite-sized pieces, what is it that we need to do in order to accomplish that goal? And so those are going to be the different benchmarks that we look at. From there, right, we're going to have metrics. And the metrics are going to be quantifiable things that we can measure, which are designed to support our benchmarks. Right? And then from there, we've got standards or performance standards, if you will, that are going to be designed to layer up and support our metrics, or we get our standards from our metrics. And so hopefully what you'll see is this is almost kind of a funnel. Everything supports each other. It's going to layer up to the next thing. And we're going to go in sequential order, talk more about each one of these individual items and put them together. And at the end of the day, my hope is that we walk out of here with not only the knowledge you need in order to go and put together an annual business plan, but also a tool that you can utilize to help build a custom business plan, custom to your business. So we're going to go ahead and dive into the elements right now. And the first one is goal, right? So up here we have a couple questions. We're going to start with a goal. We need to figure out what that goal is. Right? So ask yourself, what do you want? How bad do you want it? Some very basic questions, seemingly, right? But at the end of the day, when you really stop to ponder that question, it can be difficult to answer. It's like, well, what do I really want? And then how bad do I want it? And so we're going to try and go through that process in order to create a goal. And to try and put some parameters around this, let's talk about what it is we want. And at the end of the day, it's your aspirations. And those are going to be unique, individual, specific to you. And so you need to figure out what it is you want. And a suggestion there is maybe doing some sort of vision board exercise. And just take out a piece of paper and start writing down things that come to your mind, things that you want, right? It's kind of a fun exercise if you haven't done it in a long time, but just anything that comes to mind that you can think of that you want. Another thing to be cognizant of, these are things you need as well, right? So that's kind of the first step, is trying to identify what are all our wants, right? And when we look at it in the framework of aspirations have different stages, right? So all aspirations, goals, if you will, they'll start out as a want. And we've got a definition up there to define these stages. And a want, it's something that we can identify, but we aren't necessarily taking steps toward achieving that this year. Maybe it's something that we say we want and something we can put our finger on, but it's not something we're willing to get uncomfortable for at this point in our life. The next stage of an aspiration is a desire, right? This is something that you're willing to work for. you're willing to get a little uncomfortable for it as long as it's achievable and the path isn't fraught with too much resistance, right? So that would be a desire. A passion, on the other hand, that's something that you're willing to suffer for, right? And suffer in the sense that you are willing to get uncomfortable for that item. You're willing to do whatever it takes in order to achieve that. If you need to go out and deliver pizzas, on the weekends and the evenings, you're going to make certain things show up in your life from a dollar standpoint because they're that important to you. And that's ultimately what we want to get to as far as identifying what it is we want. We want to try and identify everything that we're passionate about. All right. So just a quick analogy, quick example, right? New Year's resolutions, everybody says they want to eat better or get in better shape, right? That tends to be something that people can say, I want to do that. I want to be healthier. I want to get in better shape. Okay. That's a want at that point in time. Okay. If you don't take any steps toward achieving that, that's where it stays. It's a want. But let's say you bought a gym membership or you bought a piece of equipment to put in your home to actually work out on. Okay. Now you've taken some steps towards actually making that happen. Right? Now we've moved into the desire phase. You're actually taking some action and doing some things in order to make those happen, in order for those to come to fruition. Right? That's good, right? But what happens when a little bit of adversity comes into play? What happens when, that kid gets born and all of a sudden you were up at, all hours of the night, taking care of that child, and now you're burnt out. You're not going to the gym or you're not working out in the house anymore. You're not eating as well just because it's not as convenient to do so. Okay, that stayed in the desire phase. It never evolved to the passion stage, which might look like something of, even though I was up at all hours of the night, I'm going to work out on my lunch break, or I'm going to meal prep and make something healthy for the week for myself. I don't care what it is. Maybe I'll get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to work out before everybody else gets up. Right? You're willing to suffer. You're willing to get uncomfortable for those things, and that's what we're really trying to identify as the things that we want. Meaning the things that we're passionate about. Okay. And then how bad do you want it? That's where want, desire, and passion comes into play. And so when we're doing our vision boarding exercise, we're going to look at those things as far as everything we've written down, and then we're going to have to categorize it. Is this a want, a desire, or a passion? And at the end of the day, there's a fourth stage too, which we want to avoid altogether. That's an obsession, right? We don't want this to become something that takes over in our life, ruins relationships and becomes the sole thing that we focus on, right? That's unhealthy. But just, know that stage is out there. Okay, so we've talked about this so far. Now, putting it into practice, what does that look like from a goal standpoint? Okay, prioritize and budget, right? Put your Dave Ramsey hat on right here, okay? What we need to do is everything that we've written down, we need to prioritize, which means establishing what gets funded first. And if you've got 50 things you've written down, list them out in importance from 1 to 50. Right? And then at some point on that line, or at some point in that list, you draw a line at maybe it's line item 35, and you say, hey, everything from 35 to 1, that's a passion of mine. That's a must-have. That is something I need to fund in my life, right? And we identify those things as passions, right? And then we go through the budgeting scenario where it's, hey, we're actually putting a specific monthly dollar amount to that line item for what we feel that's going to cost us in order to have. Right? Basically, what we're trying to do is we're trying to quantify our lifestyle. We're putting a dollar figure to it. And we're doing that in 3 different distinct categories, right? The first one's the personal budget. So figuring out what is it that you need on a monthly basis in order to live the life that you want to live, right? So when we're thinking about vision boarding or writing things down, right, there's some things that are going to fall in the personal budget, but you're going to have things like the rent, the mortgage, childcare, groceries, things like that fall in there. I mean, it's kind of weird to say I'm passionate about paying for my groceries, but another way of looking at it is, well, those are must-haves, right? You have to have those things in your life. So what does that look like from a monetary standpoint on a monthly basis? And so within the framework of the personal budget, right, we need to identify all those items, prioritize them, and then put dollar figures to each one of them. Okay. So that's step 1 in trying to identify our goals. Step 2, we're going to take the same approach that we just took to our personal budget and trying to figure out, the lifestyle we want to live by prioritizing and budgeting those items. We're going to do that on the business budget as well, right? What does it take to operate your business on a monthly basis, right? We need to understand what those different line items are, right? We need to understand how much those line items are on a monthly basis, right? So that then becomes our business budget. Okay. Then we got another circle over there called aspirations. right? And we've talked about the aspirations already. And at the end of the day, the aspirations category are things that you still identified as wanting, desiring, or being passionate about that maybe didn't fall in the personal budget or didn't fall in the business budget, right? There were things outside of those two categories that you still wanted to fund in your life. That could look like, I don't know, maybe that's college funding, a vacation home, a boat, things like that. We want to identify, okay, if those are things that we're passionate about, we need to also quantify how much are those things going to cost me this year? What should I allocate towards those, right? So when we figured out all those different buckets, we can add them together, and now we've got a goal. We've got an entrepreneur's mantra, right? And the way we look at an entrepreneur's mantra is this is the total funding needed in order for you to live the lifestyle that you want to live, whatever a successful life looks like for you, right? And it should be unacceptable for you to earn less than that number, right? This goal is meaningful and it is specific to your life. And we do that intentionally, right? Because we want it to be something that we have a tie to and that we understand where these numbers are coming from. Because if we just throw a random number out there saying, hey, it'd be nice to make $100,000 a year, maybe I'll make that my goal. Well, at the first sign of adversity, we might back away from that goal and say, I didn't really need all of that. And so we want to be proactive in identifying, well, what is it that we said are our must-haves? What is it that we said is a successful life for us, right? So now all of a sudden when adversity comes through, these are items that we're passionate about, we're willing to suffer for, and we can push through in order to make these things come to fruition. So that's goal, right? Very, very specific, very meaningful. And then, we take basically our lifestyle, our life wants and needs and passions, we put them together and we put dollar figures to them, right? It's not about the money itself. It's about what that money represents. Okay. Now that we've got this goal, we've got this number that we've identified, the next thing we want to do is try and break that down a little bit more into, okay, what are some steps or what are some things, benchmarks I can look at in order to help me achieve that actual goal? So here we go. We've got some benchmarks that we want to take this entrepreneur's mantra, our total revenue target, and we want to run it through a few things. All right. So a couple numbers that we need to know, that we need to figure out. Average commission percent. Okay. So for you and your business, what does that look like for you? Right? Is it 2.5% per transaction, 2.7, 2.8, 2.9? What does that look like for you and your business? Right? We want to understand what that number is. Right? Because from there, what we're able to do is if we can take that commission percent and we know what our profit goal is or our total revenue target is in our entrepreneur's mantra, we take that entrepreneur's mantra and then we divide it by our average commission rate, right? Let's say it's 2.8%. Take my entrepreneur's mantra, I divide it by 0.028, and then all of a sudden I got my next benchmark, my sales volume needed. Okay, now I have a target to go after. Okay, I took this lofty number that was a goal, right? And I whittled it down into at least something now I can see and understand, which is a sales volume target to go after. Okay, so that's important. The next thing we need to know is, well, what's our average home sales price? Right? So what does that look like historically for you and your business? If you're just starting out, maybe you're using just, whatever the office's average home sale price is, or, whatever specific area you're operating in. Well, once we take that average home sales price, okay, we get our transaction benchmark, right? Because we take the sales volume that we need in order to reach our goal, we divide it by our average home sale price, and now we have our transaction benchmark. So now we're starting to create more benchmarks for us to target that are layering back up to help us reach our profit goal or our entrepreneur's mantra. So continuing on with those benchmarks, okay, you saw that we just whittled down into how many transactions we need to do in order to make our profit goal show up for the year. Now what we want to do is understand, where are those transactions going to come from in our own business, right? And so one of the things we recommend that you do is take a look at what you've done in the past, right? Maybe under the this year column, you write in how many transactions on the listing side did I get from my network, FSBOs, expireds? A lot of these might be zeros, but you want to understand, where is your business coming from and which sources are they coming from, right? Then the idea would be, okay, this is what I did last year, and I look at how many total transactions I did. For this next year coming up, what is it that I need to allocate from my total transaction benchmark? I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to start allocating that. So that way I know, where is it that I'm going to be spending my efforts, my activities, and my energy, right? So now we took the total transaction benchmark that we need to do for the year, and we boiled it down into specific areas of business, right? where our transactions are going to be coming from. So those are our benchmarks, right? Now, I think a lot of people who have done business planning have done what we've done so far. You made it to this point, but now we might be getting more so into the weeds, right? We're going to be taking those benchmarks, which are great to have versus having nothing, but we want to take it a step further, and we want to get into metrics. And the metrics are designed for us to understand what is it that we need to do? What are our conversion ratios from an activity level standpoint, what we're going to need to do in order for our transactions to come to fruition in each one of the sources. And so the idea would be, let's create conversion ratios for that. And if you've never tracked that, which most people haven't, there's some sample percentages down there by different sources that you can utilize as far as benchmarks to start with, or metrics to start with, if you will, like a jumping off point. As you track this data for yourself over time, maybe for a solid 3 months, then you could start to use your actual metrics and consider those reliable. But and I don't want you to look at this slide right now and get caught up in the math of it. I don't want you to try and figure out, okay, what are we dividing? What's A through F? What are all these percentages and how are we getting them? No, I just want you to understand the concept here, right? So if we were going to go and create metrics, and let's say, we've got a few transactions that we're going to be doing within our network on the listing side. And so instead of that number being 0 up there, let's say it was 2 or 3, right? I'm going to have a conversation with myself and use those recommended, percentages underneath the listing department network box below to figure out what are my metrics. And so I'm going to start from the bottom and work my way back up, because for me, that makes the most sense. And so let's run through an example real quick with the network. All right. So basically what we're trying to say is, what is it that I need to do, or what do my conversion ratios look like within specifically working my network to try and get listings? Okay. So start it with F, which is talk rate, which is basically just saying, hey, when I call somebody or reach out to somebody in my own network, how often do I actually talk to them? Okay. You see the number down there, a recommended one is 95% of the time. These are percentages, by the way. So, if it's somebody somebody in your network, most likely they're going to get back to you at some point in time. So you would have a high talk rate, right? So you might put 95% in the talk rate under network, right? Or you could adjust that to what you feel is accurate for your life and your business. The next thing we do is we figure out what's the set rate, which another way of looking at that is, okay, I've talked to people in my network. Let's say I talked to 10 people in my network. Out of those 10 people I talked to, how many of those people am I going to actually set a meeting to talk about their interest in real estate? And see if they're looking to list at all. Okay. Probably not a ton, right? You see those recommendations down there say 5%, 7%, 10%. So maybe 1 out of 10 people that you talk to, maybe it's even less. Maybe it's 2%. But that's what we're trying to establish for your business. What are these metrics? And then the show up rate would be, hey, let's say I've scheduled 10 meetings with people in my network. Okay. Well, how many of those people are actually going to show up? That's the show up rate. And the example in the network box is 95%, right? These are people even if they can't make it, most likely they're going to reschedule. I think very few of our people that we know in our network are going to stand this up. But again, have the conversation with yourself to start creating these benchmark metrics. The next one's conversion rate, right? You have somebody show up, they're interested in listing, and how many of those people do you end up, getting the deal from? How many of them want to sign with you and want you to be their agent moving forward, right? That would be the conversion rate there. And then your sales percentage. Okay, how often does it actually go through as a sale, right? So the idea is wherever you've allocated transactions to within these different sources, network, expired, FSBOs, farming, referrals, right? Figure out, one, how many are you going to try and produce out of that source for the year? And two, what are your metrics? What are your metrics? And again, I want you to understand the concept here and not the math, right? We're going to work on the math in a little bit. Okay. So that's the listing department conversion rates, right? We also did transaction sources for our buyer department. So it's the exact same thing that we're doing over here. Although for the buyer side, we're going to have a couple different things as far as, different things that we're doing. You can see we're going talk rate. We're figuring out our set rate, show up rate, car ride rate, written rate, acceptance rate, and then close percentage, right? It's the same idea though. You can start down at the bottom and we say, okay, on the buyer side, maybe for open houses, you say, hey, maybe identified 2 or 3 transactions that I want to get from open houses this year on the buyer side. And you say, well, what's my talk rate at an open house? Well, probably 100%, right? You're going to go to open house, you're going to have people there, you're going to be able to talk to them, right? What's your set rate though? Out of all the people that you talk to at the open house, who are you scheduling follow-up meetings with? Okay, that would be the set rate. Then out of all those meetings that you scheduled, how many of them actually show up? Right? And then from there, when you have to show up to the meeting, how many of those meetings translate into, hey, let's get in the car, let's go take a look around, or let's take the next step, right? Then you have the written rate, which is the next one, and then the acceptance. How often do those offers get accepted? And then what's the closing percentage? Right, so we're doing the same thing, just working those numbers backwards. And again, you have recommended percentages that you can use there down at the bottom, right? And so you can use those, or you can or have a conversation with yourself around, yeah, if I did talk to 10 people, how many of them would actually schedule a meeting with, and just kind of run through those hypotheticals. Again, that's a starting place for us, right? Because if we don't have these numbers already, we want to start from somewhere. Right. And if we track this information, then, like I said before, over 3 months' time, we can start to consider that data more reliable. And then we can transition off of using what we created here into our actuals, and those become even more meaningful. Right. So those are the metrics, right? These are conversion ratios, things that we're trying to understand that ultimately get us into what is it that I need to do from an activity level standpoint, right? Those are standards or performance standards, if you will, right? So we're going to take our metrics, we're going to take all those percentages, and we're going to create numbers from those percentages by doing simple division. And again, I don't want you to get caught up in how the math is working here. I just want you to get caught up in the concept, which is we've identified our conversion ratios, which are percentages, right? Now, from the listing side of things, we could go back to our metrics tab and look at all those percentages, and we simply divide. So in order to understand how many, if I'm looking at the listing department, and I'm looking at, doing a few transactions on my network, and I'm trying to understand, well, how many listings do I actually need to take in order to get, 2 transactions in my network, or whatever it was we ended up putting in. Right. Well, in order to understand that, you go back to your metrics side and you divide A by B, right? And that's how you get G. That's right here. And so you have that column over there on the right? So that's just to give you. I just mentioned that so that way you understand how these letters are corresponding and working together, right? So over on the side where you have the arrow that says, hey, G is A divided by B. I go over to my listing department and I see that G means how many listings do I need to take? Okay. When I go back to my metrics and I divide A by B, that's a number. Then that represents how many listings I need to take, right? And then, well, how many meetings do I need? Well, then you take that number G, basically, and divide it by C from the metric side. So that's how the math here works. But what we're doing, again, don't worry about the math yet. I want you to know about the concept. The concept is we figured out these conversion ratios, these percentages. Now we're using those percentages to tell us from an activity level standpoint, what are these we need to do on an annual basis, right? And again, annual. When we're looking at business plan, we tend to look at this on an annual basis. And so that's kind of the time frame I want us to be thinking about when we're going through the business plan. Okay. So great. Now we've gone through metrics. We've got our standards, which is basically our activities that we're supposed to do. We put it all together, right? We put it all together and it becomes a business plan for us, right? So we got a goal. It's our entrepreneur's mantra. It's meaningful. It's specific. It's wrapped up in an actual total revenue target. It's a number that we can put our finger on, okay? And then we created our benchmarks, right? We created, looking at the different metrics as far as our commission rate, our average home sales price, total volume that we need to do, transaction benchmarks, and we took those benchmarks and we dialed those benchmarks down into smaller benchmarks in that how many am I going to do per source? And then we took that, we said, okay, well, what are conversion ratios and our metrics? Right? And then we took those ratios and we create standards. Right? There we go. That's a business plan. If we were to go through the steps, creating all those different items, our result would be a business plan. And so you got an example of what that might look like on the screen up there, where I've got my total number listed up there, my profit goal, expenses, all my different benchmarks, my weekly attempts that I need to do. So that's how you would put together a business plan, or that's the different ingredients that you need in order to put together a business plan. So I'm hoping that you're asking yourself now, okay, well, that's great. How did you put all that stuff together? And so that's what we're going to get into next. I want you to take a look, I want you to take a look at that link that's up there, and it is case sensitive, right? But that link will take you to an Excel document resource that we're going to jump into in just a second. But basically what that is I make sure you take a picture or write that link down so that way you can get to the resource I'm about to show you. If for some reason that link doesn't work, you have my email right there. You can just shoot me an email and I'll email you over this form. So, okay, at this point in time, we're going to transition out of the PowerPoint because I want to take you through the different elements of this business plan. I want to show you the different things that we're going to be using and talking about in order to put this all together. Okay, and get over to the first tab. Okay, all right. So the first thing that we talked about was building a goal, right? Well, that's what we're doing here. We're building a goal, and we started by doing personal budget, business expenses, and we're talking about our aspirations. And so I've got an example up here of what a budget might look like. Now, everything you see in tan on this spreadsheet is for you to go in and edit, for you to go in and enter your own information to build a business plan, right? The things that you see in gray are auto-calculating fields that based on the data you've input are going to calculate for you, okay? So the idea would be, let's go ahead and start out building a budget, right? What does that look like, right? You can come in, you can change these categories, you can delete some of these categories. I've just got numbers up here just to kind of illustrate what a personal budget might look like for somebody, right? And at the end of the day, after I've gone through and I've created my personal budget, I'm going to see from a monthly standpoint what it is I need. So this person, they need $5,920 a month in order for them to live the lifestyle that they want to live. Okay, so that's an important number to know, right? We've gone through and we built a meaningful, specific personal budget. We see for the year now, that's about 71 grand. Okay, so we're on our way to creating our entrepreneur's mantra, right? So the next thing we're going to do, we're going to come over to the business expense tab, right? And we're going to do the same thing that we just did over on the personal budget tab, right? So again, you can change these, you can delete them, you can come in and change the numbers here, right? Again, I just have this in for illustration purposes of what a business budget might look like for an agent. Right? So idea would be come through here, figure this out. And for this specific agent, they're spending $4,800 a month on their business. And so we know we need to generate that revenue as well in order for our business to operate. For the year, that's about 57 grand. Okay, we're getting close. We got 2 out of the 3 things we need for our entrepreneur's mantra. The next thing, everything that falls outside of the personal budget, the business budget, that maybe that we did on our vision board quest, or there's things that we can think of, right? And you can use this form to do that. Just kind of jot down all the different things you can think of that you want, right? So in here, I've got boat, vacation, college savings, wedding fund, vacation home, okay? The list could go on and on, right? So the idea is, again, we're looking at this from an annual standpoint, right? So from an annual standpoint, how much money would you need to generate or want to generate for maybe a down payment on a boat or to buy the whole boat, right? That's personal. That's up to you. Do you want to put money down, finance the rest of it, or do you want to buy the whole thing outright? What does that look like for you? Maybe in this case, I'd like to put 12 grand towards that. That's what this is saying. The next thing, the vacation fund. Okay, maybe there's a vacation I've been eyeballing I want to take this year and it's going to cost around 10 grand. Okay. College savings, hey, kids are, getting up there, still got a lot of years left, but we need to be putting money away for them. I'd like to put around 2 grand away for them for the year. All right, wedding fund, it'd be nice to be able to put away some money for that so that doesn't come up and bite us when that sad day happens. Vacation home, how much would you like to set aside this year for a down payment on that vacation home, right? So these are just examples. Then after you've done that, right, you figured out what your aspirations are. You figured out how much money you'd like to put towards that specific line item this year. The next thing to do is to select a stage for each aspiration, right? So you come in the middle, you got this drop down. Is this a want, a desire, or a passion, right? So we go back to trying to figure out, where does this fall in our life, right? Are we really going to, do we really need that boat this year? Is it just a want, right? So we've got it currently categorized as a want. So that means I'm not going to take specific action towards that 12 grand. If it happens, it happens. That'd be a nice little bonus, nice little extra. Maybe if I won the lottery, or maybe if my business, I did twice as much as I was anticipating for the year. Now I know where maybe that overflow cash would go. That would be a nice thing. But at this point in time, we're not going to suffer for that this year. That stays a want, okay? But that vacation, maybe that's a passion, right? We've all been cooped up for too long, and we need to get out. We need to get out. We need to vacate. I don't care what it's going to cost me. I'm going to make that this year because that's important to me. That's a passion, all right? Same thing for the college savings. That's passion for you, all right? Then we get down to the wedding fund. Kids is still really young. I don't really need to be putting money away towards that. It would be nice, but it's not above a want at this point in time. Vacation home, it's more than a want. I've thought about even where I want it to be. So it's a desire at this point in time, but I'm not actively taking steps towards that 10 grand this year. Okay. So the idea is, once you've categorized everything, you scroll down to the bottom, you're going to see your wants, desires, and passions added up over here. Now you see the total passions, that's in yellow. That's highlighted because that's important. Only your passions flow over to your total revenue target, to your entrepreneur's mantra, right? That the desires and the wants that get calculated there, they do not make it into your entrepreneur's mantra. Because again, the entrepreneur's mantra is something that we need to look at as it's unacceptable to make less than, right? It's a specific number that we're passionate about, that we're going to go after. Okay. So now we get over to the next tab, which is our funding requirements, right? So we're going to see a couple things going on over here. We see our profit goal requirement. That's 83,000 and change, right? That is your personal budget plus your passions. And that's how we got that number. Okay, your business budget. I came directly over from your business expenses, right? That's where that number is. Tax liability. You didn't think we forgot about the tax man, did we? Right? As independent contractors, we know we're going to have this bill. And so, again, the TAN categories are where you can come in and you can adjust and change the numbers. And so, what's your tax rate look like, right? Is it 20%? Is it 22%? Whatever that looks like for you and your business. What's that amount is going to be? And so let's just roll with 23%. And now we have our entrepreneur's mantra figured out, right? That 160 grand that's up there is going to cover our profit goal. It's going to, being our personal budget and our aspirations. It's going to cover our business expenses. It's going to cover our tax liability as well, right? So there we go. Specific and meaningful total revenue target that we're going after. Okay. Now, right, as we did when we were going through our presentation, we got to take that entrepreneur's mantra and start whittling it down into benchmarks, into metrics, into standards, right? So transaction benchmark. Okay. Again, gray, auto-calculated based on data you've inputted. And the tan is for us to go in and input our numbers, right? So our entrepreneur's mantra flows over of 160 grand, right? Below that, we're going to put in our commission rate. What is that in our own business, right? Because that's going to dictate what our sales volume is. So what is your average commission per transaction? Go ahead and write that. And then our sales volume gets calculated for us. Okay, we need to do 5.7 million in volume in order to make that 160 grand show up. Right? Now, with our average home sale price, I entered 350,000 here. With it being that, I'm looking at 16 transactions and change. Okay. Now, there's not really such thing as a 0.3 transaction. So we're always just going to round up to be on the safe side. So we're going to call that 17 transactions. Okay. Next, what percent of those transactions, of those 17 transactions or 16 and change, are going to come from sellers and buyers? Right. So just figure out, well, how many are going to come from sellers? And let's say we're thinking 60% of our business is going to come from sellers. You write that in. We know 40% is coming from buyers. And so, okay, we want to try and plan for 10 transactions on the seller side, 7 transactions from the buyer side. Right? That gets auto-calculated for us. So great. Now we've got some benchmarks to shoot for, right? It's starting to become a little more tangible as far as how are we going to attain that goal? Well, we need to do 17 transactions. 10 of those we think are going to be sellers, 7 of those we think are going to be buyers. Let's go ahead and plan those out in our transaction sources, right? So we've got a transaction benchmark that flows over, and our planned transactions for next year gets calculated based on how many we've entered in these red columns here or in the next year columns. And so again, explain this in the PowerPoint where I look at, hey, this last year, how many transactions did I do in each one of these sources? Okay, so it looks like last year I've got a total of 8 on the listing side, and then I've got a total of 5 on the buyer side. Okay, so I did 13 deals last year. I need to do 17 this year. Okay, I need to plan out my 17. Okay, it doesn't have to be specifically 10 and 7 on listing buyer side, but that's what we said on our benchmarks. And so let's go ahead and try and allocate 10 transactions on the listing side and 7 transactions on the buyer side. That's what these numbers represent. All right, I'm gonna try and do 6 from my network, 2 FSBOs, 2 expireds. On the buyer side, I'm gonna do 4 from the network, 2 open house and 1 from farming. I just pulled out some numbers. Not saying that's what you should do. That's just in there for illustration purposes. Okay, great. Now I've taken my benchmark and I've allocated them into the different sources of business that are options for me, right? The next thing to do is to start tackling my metrics, right? So when I said don't worry about the math, it's because we're going to do the math for you on this sheet, right? Thank goodness. But what you do need to do is you need to put in your conversion ratios, right? And so again, we have on the side, we've got that blue box that's got those recommended percentages that are in there that you can use as guides, if you will. And then you come in and you start, just like we went through the conversation of, hey, if I need six deals on the listing side for my network, and my talk rate's 90%, out of that 90% talk rate, I set a meeting 7% of the time. And on all of the meetings that I have, 95% of the time they show up. All right. And then my conversion ratio from those meetings where I'm getting the business is 85% of the time. And as far as closing that, it's 80% of the time. Okay, great. So then once you go through and you enter in all of the ratios for that specific source, you're going to see down below your annual listing performance standards are allocated or calculated for you. So I see that, hey, for the year, I need to make 147 attempts in my network, 133 talks. I need to set 9 meetings, have 9 meetings. I need to take 8 in order to close 6. Right. So now we have some specific standards to shoot for my network source within the listing department. So that's what we're trying to get down to, right? So you notice some of these are blank, right? It's because I didn't plan any transactions in those categories, right? Whatever transactions I planned in those categories automatically came through from the previous tab, right? Take it a step further, scroll down here. How many weeks out of the year are you going to work? You know, work 52? Probably not. 48, 40, 30? I don't know. That's a personal decision. And here I put 40. Say it was 45. However many weeks you put in, you're going to see that we're trying to boil down your activity level to a weekly level, to a weekly number. So we have our annual numbers up here. Now we got our weekly numbers right here. So how many weeks out of the year are you going to work? Okay, if it was 40 weeks, now in order to get my 6 deals out of the network on the listing side, I need to be making about 4 attempts a week. 4 attempts a week in my network. All right, I need to be talking to 3 to 4 people a week. I need to be setting at least a meeting a month or around a meeting a month, right? So I'm not saying that those are what your numbers are going to be, but that's just showing you how the math is working here. Okay, so once we've done our listing metrics, we do the exact same thing for the buyer metrics, right? You're going to see that the transactions that we allocated on the buyer side flows over. On the tan areas, we come in and we input our conversion ratios. As a result of inputting those conversion ratios, those percentages, we're going to get our performance standards listed out down here, right? By source, okay? Again, we can come in and say, you know, how many weeks out of the year are we going to work? If it was 40 on the other one, make it 40 over here, right? Okay, so there we go. We've created our metrics. We've got standards that got spitted out to us from an annual standpoint, but then also a weekly standpoint. Now, Some of you may not want to get into the weeds to this level of detail. And if you don't, that's okay. We have another option over here, which is going to be the combined metrics option, which is more kind of just looking at everything from a holistic standpoint. So instead of by source creating performance standards, maybe we just create some ballpark standards, right? So we understand that we need to do 17 transactions that flowed over. And again, we're say how many weeks out of the year we're going to work. Okay, let's say that's 40. Okay, now as an aggregate, what do our conversion ratios look like whenever we're making an attempt out in the marketplace? Okay, we make an attempt out in the marketplace. How many times do we actually talk to people? Maybe it's 40% of the time we talk to people. So we put 40% in the talk rate. Okay, well, let's say we talk to 20 people. Out of those 20 people, how often do we actually set a meeting? With 20 people that we talk to? I don't know. Maybe it's 10% of the time. And then you say maybe 65% of the time to actually show up to that meeting. And when we have that meeting, maybe 60% of the time we're actually, getting an acceptance from them as far as, doing business with them. And then our close ratio is 80%. Okay. So if we just want to do some basic, high level metrics like that to at least give you some sort of ballpark benchmark to shoot for from an activity or attempt level standpoint, you can do that. So based on what I just entered right here, it's saying, hey, on an annual basis, make 1,300 attempts. On a monthly basis, make 114 attempts. On a weekly basis, make 34 attempts. Okay, so at least I have something, right, to start from. And again, if I'm tracking all of my activity that I'm doing, I can come back and I can make these numbers more specific and meaningful to my business and my actual conversion ratios when I've been tracking them over time. All right. So just do one of these. If you don't do the listing metrics tab and the buyer metrics tab, do this one. Right? Because this one's a little bit easier, less involved. But the last tab is basically an aggregate of everything that we've put in here. Right? This is our one-sheeter business plan. This is our marching orders for the year. Right? So based on the data I've entered, I see that, hey, it's unacceptable to earn less than $159,859. Okay? That's my goal. That's my target. My total revenue number, that's my entrepreneur's mantra. Broken down a little bit, we see that the profit goal is 83 grand. Remember, that's your personal lifestyle and the personal budget, and that's your aspirations. I get added there. Okay? The next one is cost of doing business. Right? So that's $57,000 goes to our operating expenses or our budget expenses, right? Transaction benchmarks flows over, right? I got to do 10 listing side. I got to do 7 buyer side. My volume benchmark that I need to hit for the year is 5.7 million. Hey, with a $350,000 average home sale price and 2.8% commission benchmark, right? So those are kind of my metrics I want to be tracking as well. Am I falling within that range? Am I falling short this year of my average home sale price? If I'm falling short of it, my transaction benchmark might go up. If my average is actually 400, my transaction benchmark might go down. What if my commission benchmark is hovering around 2.3% instead of 2.8? Well, then our transaction benchmark is going to go up. And you can come back in here and you can readjust those numbers. And so the idea is create this for the year, but tweak it along the way based on what your actual numbers are, right? And then down below, based on the sources, as far as where I want to get my transactions from and where I'm counting on that business to come from, where I'm going to focus my efforts on, I have weekly attempts that come over as far as what I need to be doing. So based on the data I entered, this took the data from the listing metrics tab and the buyer's metrics tabs. It did not take it from the combined metrics tab, right? But so based on the data from the listing metrics tab and the buyer metrics tab, I need to be making at least 16 attempts per week. Again, I'm not saying that's what your numbers should be. It's just for illustration purposes here. So there you go. A tool that hopefully any of you can use to come and build a business plan if you don't have one already built for you. And that's the purpose of this, right? It's to be able to come in to create a custom business plan specific to you as far as your wants, needs, and your passions, so that you can go out and understand, well, what is my goal? What are my benchmarks? What are my metrics? What are my standards? And so you have a plan, right? You're set on a path, and you're not just wishing, waiting, and hoping, but you are planning to succeed in that case. And then the rest of the equation of being successful is the proactive piece, right? So everything we talked about today was the intentional components, right, of building that plan. All right. So it doesn't stop here. In order to make this come to fruition, in order to be successful, then we need to go ahead and move to the proactive side, which is actually taking action against this plan. So thanks so much, guys, for your time and being here and going through this with me, and happy to answer any questions that you guys might have.
Okie dokie. All right, there you go. So that was the building your business. Looks like I got a message here. You're welcome, April. Thank you for showing up. So this will go up on the Facebook group page here in just a little bit. Daniel is awesome. I'm in a meeting with him about once every 6 weeks, and I really like talking to him. So I'm going to post this, and yeah, appreciate you guys showing up. See you later.